Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
This is the Bloomberg Daybreak Europe podcast. Good morning. It's Tuesday, the 19th of August. I'm Stephen Carroll in London. Coming up today, US President Donald Trump pushes for Vladimir Putin and Volodymyr Zelenskiy to meet after the Ukrainian leader visits the White House. Traders expect the Bank of England to keep rates on hold at 4% for the rest of this year. Plus, going off-piste, Saudi Arabia's plans for a desert ski resort strain the country's $1.5 trillion NEOM megacity plan. Let's start with a roundup of our top stories. The US President Donald Trump has called Vladimir Putin and urged the Russian leader to begin making plans for a summit with Volodymyr Zelenskiy. The move comes after Trump met his Ukrainian counterpart and European leaders at the White House. The US President is proposing that Putin and Zelensky first hold a one-on-one meeting, followed by a three-way summit with him in attendance. Zelensky said he would be willing to discuss territorial issues with Putin.
What is very important that all the sensitive things, territorial and etc., we will discuss on the level of leaders during trilateral meeting, and President Trump will try to organize such meeting, and he said that he will come or not come. Ukraine will be happy if you will participate.
Want me there, I will be there.
Yeah, thank you.
Zelensky added he was pleased Trump had agreed to two key asks: participating in security guarantees as part of any peace deal and reserving discussion of territorial exchanges for direct talks with Putin. European officials say they expect another virtual meeting with Trump as soon as today to discuss what security guarantees they could collectively offer to Kyiv. SoftBank has agreed to buy $2 billion of Intel stock in a surprise deal. The Japanese firm says the investment is testament to its belief that advanced chip manufacturing and supply chains will continue to grow in the United States. News of the purchase came as Bloomberg learned the Trump administration is also considering taking a 10% stake in Intel. Here's Bloomberg's M&A reporter Ryan Gould.
I think if you're a shareholder, you're looking and you're probably well aware of some of the challenges facing Intel from a balance sheet perspective. What this deal does on the one hand is give confidence to Intel. It gives confidence to shareholders in terms of you have the most creditworthy institution in the world backing you. But what it doesn't do, at least on the face of it, is solve the problem that Intel has with its product.
Bloomberg's Ryan Gould reports that the plan could involve converting Intel's $10.9 billion in CHIPS Act grants from the US government into equity. Money markets are betting that the Bank of England will keep interest rates on hold at 4% for the rest of this year as signs of faster inflation reduce the case for more easing. Bloomberg's Ewan Potts has more.
It's not so long since traders were expecting the second half of this year to see a continued easing in UK interest rates, but now the market sees a less than 50% chance of a cut before 2026. Bets on lower rates diminished after the BOE's unexpectedly hawkish recent meeting, which saw 4 MPC members vote not to cut rates at all. Tomorrow's inflation data is forecast to show the headline rate increasing to 3.7% in July, with the BOE forecasting a peak of 4% in September, double the bank's target. In London, I'm Ewan Potts, Bloomberg Radio.
The yield on UK 30-year inflation-linked bonds is at its highest level since 1998. It's the latest unwanted market milestone for the UK government, as long-dated yields are now higher than during Liz Truss's gilt-market meltdown. There's no clear catalyst for the moves, which are gradual and not unique to Britain. Instead, they reflect pension funds and investors moving away from government debt. Staying in the UK, the government's reportedly asking officials to draw up plans to turn its tax on property sales into one only for the wealthiest homes. The Guardian says properties worth more than £500,000 would potentially be paying an annual tax and a further levy on selling. Bloomberg's James Wilcock has more.
Council tax has long been a bugbear of British policy experts. Based on property values recorded in 1990, it has failed to keep up with skyrocketing property prices. If The Guardian's reporting is right, Labour's potential replacement would dramatically reshape the housing market. No final decisions have been made, but if enacted, any new plan would likely hit London hard. In London, James Wilcock, Bloomberg Radio.
And the US Director of National Intelligence says Apple will no longer be forced to give the UK government a backdoor into American users' data. In a post on X, Tulsi Gabbard said the UK had agreed to drop the mandate to ensure Americans' private data remains private. Apple had refused an order from the British government to create the backdoor, but did pull its most advanced cloud security feature from the UK. Advanced data protection for iCloud remains unavailable in the country, and it's unclear if it will be restored following the news. Those are your top stories on the markets. The MSCI Asia Pacific Index just flat to the downside at the moment. Eurostoxx 50 futures are 0.2% higher. Oil prices are weaker, 0.6 for Brent crude at $66.19. The 10-year Treasury yield up a basis point at 4.34%. Now, in a moment, what's next after President Zelenskyy's trip to the White House, plus the troubles facing ambitious plans for a winter sports resort in Saudi Arabia. But another story that I've been reading this morning about how the heat waves may have abated in the UK for now, but many people in London are still thinking about installing air conditioning. Olivia Rudgard has been reporting on how those living, particularly in older buildings, are facing hurdles in getting permission to install AC units. She's speaking to Richard Gill, who's director at the architecture firm Paul Archer Design, who says roughly 30% of his clients, mostly high earners in London, want air conditioning, but not all of them are able to get it, as there can be technical or aesthetic restrictions on attaching units to old buildings. Sometimes councils are simply rejecting claims of overheating. Now, it's clear that, according to some in the building trade, that properties in certain parts of London are now extremely hot during summer months. But existing restrictions are preventing or delaying installations in 30 to 40% of residential homes. Olivia cites the examples of, for example, in Camden, family denied permission for 2 AC units earlier this year because of noise and visual clutter concerns. But that is something that's part of the conversation here now after the recent hot temperatures again. Who wants air conditioning and who's able to get it? Perhaps not as simple as it might appear. You can read Olivia's full piece on Bloomberg.com. I'm up with a link to it in our podcast show notes as well. Well, let's turn now to the outcome of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy's meeting with Donald Trump in the White House. President Trump spoke to Vladimir Putin afterwards and urged the Russian leader to begin making plans for a meeting with Zelensky. Our Chief Asia correspondent Rosalind Matheson is with me now for more. Ros, are we today closer to an end to Russia's war in Ukraine?
Well, certainly there seems to be some momentum towards further talks and possibly a direct conversation between the leaders of Russia and Ukraine. And that's always been the thing that Ukraine and Russia has said is necessary to really look to bring an end to this war. And that's the two leaders sitting down directly, face to face, discussing all the very tricky issues that are required to get a peace deal. And that having, the Europeans or the US involved is one thing, but those are the only two leaders who can resolve the key questions, including around things like land. So the fact that there seems to be quite a push to get that meeting done, and perhaps within a matter of weeks, is significant. Of course, there are a lot of very tricky issues on the table. There are very long-running issues also between Russia and Ukraine that predated the full invasion of 2022 that are still simmering away, including questions around places like Crimea. So this is not going to be easy, but at least we do have an understanding, it seems, from both Russia and Ukraine, that it's about time that their leaders met face to face.
This White House trip by Volodymyr Zelenskiy went much better than the last one. The Ukrainian president dressed more formally, for example, after he was criticised the last time for what he was wearing. But what did Ukraine get from the US in terms of security guarantees?
Well, they got pretty much what Donald Trump was saying days ago, which is a fairly broad and general understanding that the US might contribute to some of these security guarantees for Ukraine. And those security guarantees are seen as crucial for Ukraine, especially if it's going to be in the position where it cedes territory to Russia. But the question is, what do those guarantees look like? And Donald Trump's being very, very woolly about all of that. He's saying maybe it's mostly for Europe to work out. The US could perhaps perhaps chip in to some extent, or maybe in the end they're not even really needed at all. So it's very, very unclear what that means. I mean, the one thing he has made very clear is he doesn't want Ukraine joining NATO. That's his red line. He said that cannot happen, but there could be some kind of generic Article 5 type understanding around Ukraine. But again, would he be willing to commit US troops to Ukraine in those scenarios? Under what scenarios would he be willing to commit US troops? So there's a lot we don't know. At least he says he's willing to consider it and to discuss it with others.
Now, Volodymyr Zelenskiy was accompanied on this trip by a host of European leaders. Was this diplomatic effort by them, the likes of Emmanuel Macron, Keir Starmer, Friedrich Merz, a success in, moving towards the conclusion that they want?
Well, they were very careful in their meetings yesterday with Donald Trump to make sure that he was being flattered as someone who'd brought everybody together, who'd been able to coax Vladimir Putin along and get the Russian leader engaged in the conversation. So quite a lot of praise for Donald Trump. Some of those leaders he really does admire and get on with. I mean, the UN Secretary General, the Finnish President, Giorgia Meloni from Italy, they were all there and carefully selected as well as leaders that he does have that rapport with. And so they were very careful to manage that conversation as it went along, and arguably perhaps get Europe back into the conversation in a way that it's not been for quite some months.
What happens next, Roz? What do we watch for in terms of developments and the key issues that will be at stake if the call between Vladimir Putin and Volodymyr Zelenskiy goes ahead?
Well, that's got to be the key thing, is the timing of any meeting between Zelensky and Putin, and do we really get on the pathway to that happening? Where does that happen? When does it happen? Is it a phone call, as you say? Is it even a face-to-face conversation? And then, of course, all the issues that would be on the table for that meeting. There's everything from further prisoner swaps. Ukraine says that Russia has taken a lot of Ukrainian children into Russia. What are the plans to potentially bring those children back? And the biggest issue of all, of course, is territory, because Zelensky, under the constitution, cannot give away Ukrainian land, but yet he might have to find a way to do so. And then what are going to be the lines for Vladimir Putin in that? What are going to be the lines for Ukraine? And that's going to get very, very delicate and could easily fall apart. But that's got to be the thing that those two leaders discuss directly, is the issue of territory.
Okay, our Chief Asia correspondent Rosla Matson, thank you very much. Stay with us. More from Bloomberg Daybreak Europe coming up after this. Now, in 2022, Saudi Arabia announced one of its most ambitious endeavours to date, a ski resort designed to host the 2029 Asian Winter Games. But Trojena, set on a mountaintop with little snowfall, is becoming the most pressing test yet of the kingdom's ability to pull off its grand ambitions and meet commitments for influential international events. Joining us now to discuss, Abir Amu Omar, who is Bloomberg's Middle East economics and government reporter. Abir, great to talk to you. Tell us then about Trojena. What is the project's goal?
Trojena is this project in Neom, the very famous project under Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's Vision 2030. It's one of 5 major sites. Those include the Line, which we've reported on quite a bit, Magna, Sindala, and Oxagon. So it's estimated, its construction is estimated to be at around $19 billion, and it's expected to host the 2029 Asian Winter Games, as you have suggested. It's supposed to feature a ski resort, ski slopes, big construction for the Games, and it fits, again, into the Crown Prince's economic transformation plan that was announced in 2016 to overhaul the Saudi economy and get the world talking about these major events that are worth over $1 trillion at this point in the Saudi desert.
So what's gone wrong with the project from what we've learned from our reporting?
Right. So I was listening to you talking about temperatures in London and this region. You know, the temperatures here really put London to shame when we talk about, the weather getting, or temperatures getting up to 50 degrees Celsius. It's not really that different in Neom Trojena is a little bit different when we compare it to the rest of the projects that are happening in the region, because it is supposed to host those winter games. So we should expect to see some snow. Now, natural snowfall in that region is very, very limited. And so what the Saudis have had to resort to is create artificial snow. Now, what we're hearing from our sources and what we've put out in the story from yesterday is that this is proving hard to achieve. The timelines just don't match up. So Trojena was supposed to be achieved, or the first phase of delivery was supposed to happen by next year. That's just around the corner. That doesn't seem to be feasible anymore. And so the committee that overlooks the Winter Games is looking over the project and seeing if these deadlines are going to be met. Some contingency plans may have to be put in place, but what we know is pumping up water through the mountain to create a frozen lake and therefore create ski slopes and a ski resort is proving to be a hard task. And so what we know for now is that those deadlines may not be met. Trojena may have to either look at alternatives to how it was envisioned in the beginning, but that is all yet to be seen.
Can the project get back on track? And I suppose, what does it mean for the Crown Prince's vision for Saudi Arabia?
Look, the first phase of delivery was supposed to happen next year. The Winter Games are still in 3 years' time, 3.5 at this point. So it could happen. What we may see is some delays in the deliveries. What we may see is, them having to figure out alternative plans. And it's not completely uncommon for the committee to look over the space and decide maybe we should look at alternative venues. Now, that's not on the table yet. NEOM has told us that, all the plans in the region are happening according to phases and that everything is on track. Now, what this means for the Crown Prince is essentially one word that's been used quite a bit by Saudi officials, by analysts we talk to, and that's rationalization. Rationalization and maturity are two words that have been used over the past couple of years, and it just shows that the Saudis are really looking at these projects and figuring out how to spend their money.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, your morning brief on the stories making news from London to Wall Street and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed every morning on Apple, Spotify and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning on London DAB Radio, the Bloomberg Business app and Bloomberg.com.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day, right here on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.